New year, new goals, but are you truly prepared to protect what matters most in your life and business? Do you know what estate planning is? Do you have your bank accounts to go to beneficiaries? Do you even know what a beneficiary is? This episode is near and dear because losing a loved one is never easy. But in the midst of all of this, you have to start preparing who gets the house, who gets the bank account, and so forth. And I'm so glad to be having this conversation because my guest has been on this show before. And since it is the beginning of the year, I thought this would be a great topic to bring back so you can start planning for it. Before I bring my guest on, let me introduce myself. My name is Shri, and I am a social media manager who helps doctors and lawyers gain an edge online. We help your practice build a social media presence that attracts, retains patients and clients. My guest, like I said, has been on here before. She's the founder of DK Law Firm, real estate broker, and community leader based in Maryland. My guest is Diana Khan, and I'm so excited to have her here. So, let me ask you, yesterday you had an event, and I don't want to call it the wrong thing, and it was called Holiday Retalks. Tell me a little bit about this event. How did you come up with it?
I host so many events that I think I'm just trying to get creative with the names. And I was like, what happens around the new year? And I was like, for most people, they detox, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but my husband's like, yeah, I'm going to do like no alcohol January and I'm going to do all that. So one of my friends was like, what are you going to do in January? And I was like, my kids have winter break. They have 23 days of winter break. I will be drinking. I will actually be enjoying the holidays in the new year when my kids go back to school. So I was like, you know what? Let's just call it one more round before we get serious. And that's kind of the idea, was just kind of get everybody out there, retox yourself back up, forget the winding down for January, like start with a splash. And I think it worked really well, mostly because we had 2 snow days. So people like not only did the kids get a really long winter break, but then we got snowed in, and me and my friends were texting. We're like, "Should we cancel this event? Are people going to show up?" I was like, "No, no, no! Like, canceling it's going to make this event not work." I was like, "I'm telling you right now, people are going to drive through literally Mount Everest to have a good time," and that's what we did. We just had an open bar. We invited everybody out and just kind of asked them to come start the new year with us. I think it was great.
And that's the way things should be. I understand if you can't have it, find a way. Like, I obviously, if it's like there's fires and we're praying for you in California, but if it's a possibility to get out of your house, why not? I mean, I would love to know if you're listening to the live or catching the replay, because I will turn this into a podcast, which will go out tomorrow. Let us know. Like, don't you want to get a drink? Don't you want to hang out with some folks? And I do want to ask you, when's your next networking event, meet and greet?
So we have a couple. I actually have a speaking event in a couple days. I think since the last time we saw you, I told you my goal was to speak more. And in January of last year, when I started, I had a goal of speaking at about 30 events for the year. I actually spoke at over 100. I got to attend an awesome event where I did not speak with Martha Stewart, but we breathed the same air.
Oh
I
my.
was at an event speaking that she was speaking at. I just got a much smaller room and a lot less attention. But it was still, it was take those goals and take them to the next level. So I am redoing it a little bit this year where I'm being more selective of what I talk about and getting in front of people to sort of help them create the life that they want. So next week, I think we have one event coming up, and then we're still doing a lot of podcasts, and I'm starting to try to speak on a more nationwide level.
I love it. I love it. And I love that you said, you know what, I'm going to do the 30, but I got 100. And now that you've done them, you're like, okay, now I know which ones I want to do and which ones
Mhm.
I shouldn't do. But I want to get into this topic about estate planning and why we really need to start thinking about it now instead of later. So, first off, like, why did you get into estate planning?
So I got into estate planning because Well, I think it's because 'cause I'm a businesswoman, really, like, I could give you a lot of reasons, but it was because, you know, I do a lot of litigation, I do a lot of law, I do a lot of real estate stuff, but estate planning is something that everybody needs. So I was sort of thinking of what do I do that's gonna help people? So I got into wills pretty much early in my career, and I thought that was estate planning. But then I think on your last live, we talked about it a little bit as well. My mom got really sick a few years ago. And when she got sick, it was really eye-opening on how much and how overwhelming things are. And it's similar, though a different life pattern than when you give birth to a baby for the first time, right? Like, I remember when I had postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety, I had a baby and I didn't know what I was doing, and I was living these Facebook forums and I was trying to figure it out. Well, when my mom got sick, it's sort of the same idea. You don't know what you're doing. You have to figure out how to do Medicaid planning and Medicare planning and what's an advance directive and how does a power of attorney work with a mortgage and how do I protect wealth and how do I do this? And then I realized there's this disconnect for people. There's just we don't normalize talking about the end of our existence. And when my mom was really sick, I realized how difficult it is, even for the most, I think, calm, non-emotional person. When it's impacting you and impacting your life, it's so difficult to handle. So I started getting into estate planning from a more of a perspective of it's not for you, it's for your family, and everybody should have an estate plan. So I've really pivoted on talking more about why don't people have it and what's the disconnect there. And believe it or not, culturally, there's race, race plays a factor, socioeconomic plays a factor. There's certain cultures that don't want to talk about death, but it's not doing anybody a service.
No, it's not. I want to say hi to Chandrea, who's saying perfect topic. We need to learn this. If you're joining us live, let us know where you're tuning in. And if you're catching the podcast episode, let us know where you're tuning in the comments. I want to talk about what Diana just said because 3 months ago, I was in the hospital with my father, and he did not have in writing that when it came time and if they couldn't help him because he was in a coma, to have the do not resuscitate. And it became a responsibility to my mom. Now, this is a conversation that is very common for doctors to have. But my cousin, who is a doctor, who's a director of the ER in Dallas, said he never realized that he should have this conversation, like with his aunts, his uncles, even his parents, because we don't think about this
Yeah.
until we're in the situation. And this is something that I wanted to ask Diana. When you start planning, especially just even planning the whole process, do you include the do not resuscitate? Do you
We d
include the take me off life support if they cannot revive me? Like, what are the things that really go into it?
So we definitely include what's called an advance directive for your wishes, which is, if you are likely to pass away, there's no chance of survival, and sort of if you're in your final moments, what are your choices? Do you want, to just be comfortable in your last few moments? Do you want nutrition and fluids by feeding tube? All these things are things that you think about. And people hate talking to me about it, but truthfully, I have been talking to children of parents who have it done with me, and they call me very much so, sometimes like 3 in the morning, and they're like, "My dad's about to pass, and he's got a do not resuscitate, and it says here that we can't change his wishes, and I just wanna talk to you because I don't understand why he would sign this." And I said, "I was in the room with him. Those were his wishes, and you should just feel comfortable with that decision." And 9 out of 10 times when I speak to them, oh, and I'm sorry, my dog is in the room. When I speak to people, it you see a relief almost. You see a relief when that choice is taken away because it's never about what is logical. It's never about, does, is there a likelihood that they're going to survive? If a doctor tells you the chance of survival are zero, there are miracles. There are definitely books we read about it. There's lots of ideas. My kids are going to kill each other, so I'm going to put myself on mute for 1 second.
As she puts herself on mute for a second, we gotta love live. I want to say
Ash,
hi
come
to
here. Come here.
Kevin
Come
for
here.
joining us
Come here right
today.
now.
and he is joining us from Montgomery Village, Maryland. Thanks for joining us today. So, I just want to bring up, like, as Diana was talking about, when you're really in that room, when you see that sense of relief, I want to give you guys just an example. So, my mom was really, really upset. Like, I was like, Mom, didn't you have this conversation with my dad? She said, No, we never talked about it. We never talked about the last steps. We never said what he wants. And I had to put myself not as the daughter, and as just looking at my dad and who he was before, this is not what he wanted. This is never the life that he wanted. And we had to really console her. Ultimately, it was put onto me. Ultimately, I had to make the decision, even though I wasn't the decision maker to sign, but it came onto me, and I told my mom, I said, look, you've known my dad for 50 plus years. He would never want that. I mean, imagine if it was you, the roles were reversed. What would you want? She's like, I wouldn't want that. I said, okay, we're doing what's best for him. And so these conversations, although they're difficult to have in the moment, they're really hard when you're in the room and you have to make that choice. Like, it's no option. And
And,
and I wish I had a Diana to call and be like, hey,
yeah. And, sometimes people it's, like, so weird. I have people who come into my room, and they're like, "Oh, well, my kids, we'll just let them decide. They'll get along," or, "We'll make the last decision be on both of our kids 50-50." Or, I'll have a spouse who's younger, who has young kids, and be like, "Yeah, it's completely up to you." And I'm like, "Don't do that." I was like, "You have young kids. Doctor says there's no chance of survival, and you say, 'Yeah, go ahead and unplug my husband.' Your kids are gonna look at you and be like, 'What you doing, mom? You gave up on dad.'" Like, you don't know what people's interpretations are. It leaves you to make a decision, and right or wrong, it doesn't really matter because people all have their own guilt, and they all have their own trauma, and they all have to live through it, and it's easier to be mad at somebody about a decision than it is to accept the grief. Anger is easier to sit with than grief, and I find that when you don't have a plan, you sit in anger because it's easier to do that.
So let's talk about this plan, and let's talk about, like, what are three things, since it is January, that one should start looking at to begin this estate planning.
So, and I've probably said this in a million podcasts, but I'm gonna say it here too. I always equate estate planning to a backpack that you have. So in my world, everybody has a backpack. You're born with a backpack. You carry it around everywhere you go. Everything is in this backpack, and when you pass away, or you don't pass away and you become incapacitated, everything you own falls to the floor. Your bills, your everything that you have, your life does not stop. Most people will have an unexpected death or it will come out, but your life doesn't stop in that moment. So whether or not you have passed or you're incapacitated, you can't open this backpack up. So your kids will have to cover bills, they'll have to cover whatever until they unwind your life. And that backpack, the estate planning portion is having instructions on what to do when you can't hold that bag anymore. And, if we talking about probate or the wishes of what happens to your stuff, before your children or your spouse or whoever it is that's inheriting your stuff takes it, they have to get permission from a courthouse to administer your estate, which essentially is picking up that backpack, taking it to a courthouse, and saying, "Hey, here's my mom's stuff. Here's all my mom's stuff." And the courthouse will say, "Okay, cool. Open it up. We're going to count it. We're going to itemize it. We're going to see what's inside. We're going to tax it. We're going to take out her debt. And about 6 to 12 months from now, whatever's left over, you can get it." And for 6 to 12 months, your family has to, if you don't have a will, sometimes they have to publish a newspaper article that says you've passed to see if anybody has any interested estates. We have to deal with your debt. There has to be dealt with all of those items. And regardless if you have an estate plan or not, the process is almost identical. But without an estate plan, now your children are trying to figure out where are the bank accounts. Where's the title to the house? Where's the title to the car? And there's some crazy stories you see. So when you talk about estate planning, the first thing is you should have a plan, regardless what it is. And if your plan is no plan, at least acknowledge that that's the plan. Um, and then I always tell people you should have a trust. I mean, ultimately, I think there's this misconception that trusts are for rich people. And really, my belief is that trusts are for smart people. It's just the difference in having a will versus a trust is that with a trust, we create a brand new backpack. It's not one you're born with. You come to my office, we create one, and we say, "This bag doesn't belong to me. It belongs to my children. It's a gift I've created for them, and I don't own it. I don't have ownership rights to it. It's a gift I'm giving my kids that becomes theirs after I die. It's theirs after my death. But while I'm alive, I'm gonna hold it. I'm gonna take all the stuff out of the bag I was born with. I'm gonna put it into the trust. I'm gonna carry it and everything. But guess what? Now, when I pass, I'm gonna drop two bags. I'm gonna drop the trust and I'm gonna drop my personal belongings. If I set it up right, the backpack with my personal belongings is actually empty. So now the trust, when it drops, it actually automatically becomes my child's entity. So they can go into my bank account the next day, take out money. They don't have to do probate. They don't have to worry about paying off debt. Like it's just theirs. They just are taking it over. It saves so much time. It saves taxes. There's quite a lot it does for you. And that's for a very 45-minute talk. But it's just, there's a reason why rich people have trust, and it's because it allows you to have generational wealth. It allows you to bypass taxes. It allows you to streamline, grief, because when you have a trust, there's really no transition period. Your kids just pick it up and your wishes are written down. And then go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, okay, so I want to first acknowledge Kevin's comment who says family members are forced to make hard decisions at the worst time. It is very true. It's so true that that happens. Now we have beneficiary. On bank accounts, they're always asking for a beneficiary. Is that, what if you don't do the trust? Do you still have to go to probate if you are listed as a beneficiary on the account?
No, you don't have to, which is fantastic. It's a nice way to bypass it. You can do paid on death benefits. Some states allow paid on death for even houses, but there's kind of a downside to it, which I don't think people realize. If I pass right now, right, and I have a paid on death benefit to a child, to a cousin, it doesn't really matter. And let's say I have $10 in there, and that $10 now is the entity or the belongings to the person I left it to. They're now taxed at a higher tax bracket. All of a sudden, they now own $10 more. And you're thinking, well, that's not a big deal. But it could be if you have a special needs child who maybe relies on government, assistance for care, can't hold a job, because of whatever limitations they have. Um, they rely on benefits. And if you pass away without a plan or you have a paid on death benefit or a beneficiary, all of a sudden now somebody who had nothing has $10 in their account and we'll have Medicaid or we'll have the state entity look and be like, well, now you don't qualify for those benefits. If you have them put into a trust, they're a separate entity from you and you supplement your income with it, so you qualify for a lot more.
What about the house? So let's say, because I know some people talk about doing a ladybird deed trust, or basically there are options out there. Is it smart to do the trust with the house and the bank accounts, or
Mhm.
do something separate?
So you should definitely do something with the house. Our biggest asset in America, at least, tends to be our property. I bought a house, I think 3 years ago, and the equity in it has grown by $300,000. And it's not that nice of a house. It is, but it's not $300,000 increase nice in a couple of years. And when I pass, if I don't have a plan and I have debt or I die with debt or anything like that, it's gonna force my kids to sell the house. It's gonna limit their fortune or it's gonna limit their wealth. If I add somebody to the deed of the house, when I pass, they own the house. There's no ability to put a lien against it because there was an additional owner. So if you add your child to the house, yes, there are negatives to it too. Right now, you can't sell your house unless your child agrees. So there's definitely different ways to consider it, but adding somebody to the deed of the house, especially a family member, right before passing helps avoid probate. It also can help with Medicaid planning. It can help with planning a lot of items. And really, you should be thinking about it. You should talk to an attorney or do some research to figure out what is the best way to preserve wealth, because it's incredible how quickly it goes.
So I love that you brought up, like, if you're joining in, we are talking about estate planning. And I thought that this was a great topic to start the year out because we don't think about it. We still have the rest of the year. I mean, there's a lot, as my daughter says, the year of 2025 really started out with the bang. So we just don't know what's to come. And that's why we're talking about it. So the things that are coming up in my mind is like, okay, we either get a trust or we do the beneficiary, but then we're being told, hey, if all the assets are under a certain dollar amount, then we don't need to worry about a trust. Is that even correct?
It can be, it varies for everybody, but if most of your assets are already pre-deeded or pre-titled to your other family members, then you don't really need a trust. But again, those things can change. What if you have children under the age of 18? Then even if you leave it to your child, the guardian's actually the person who's going to get control of it. And, what if you wanted to do additional planning? And a trust allows you to do that planning rather than just give it to your kids. And I'll just tell you what my planning is and my trust because I feel like it gives you a good conceptualization. I have 3 kids. They're currently 6, 5, and she just turned 3 and 3. And, when when I pass, no matter how much money I have or how little I have, depending on their age, if they're under the age of 21, 20% of my wealth will be distributed to their guardian, but it'll be only used for health, wellness, and safety. It won't be used for iPads, it won't be used for clothes. I have limitations on what the money is used for. From the age of 21 to 27, I have an additional 20% dispersed to go to my kids for educational purposes. And my trust says education is not for everybody. I don't really think that, if you get an art degree from a university, you'll really get a job at a law firm, right? Like you could work there, skill set can be taught. But if you're 21 and I die with $10, I'm not giving you $2 to go to a bar. Like you could do more with it. So either use it towards your education or vocational school or whatever it is that you want, or the money's going to be there for you as you kind of figure out what your life plans are. And then for my personal trust, I have 27 to 35. My kids can use additional money to purchase their primary residence. And I have a stipulation that they have to qualify for that mortgage on their own before my wealth comes in. And in my eyes, now what I've done rather than just do paid on death, you figure it out, is I've put in guidance that I think would be appropriate for my children. And at the age of 35, if you don't have it figured out by then, I don't know what to tell you. Here's the rest of it. It's yours. But regardless whether or not you're happy about, how your children are, you know who your children are. You know if you have a child that's likely to inherit $10 and take it to a bar, or if you have a child that's gonna do wisely with it. And because you can't predict when you're gonna pass, the paid on death allows you to avoid a trust, but it also doesn't allow you to have the same control and protections.
We are getting such juicy information. I mean, of course, you could just go ahead and just call Diana. And before I ask how we can contact you, we have Fonte who's saying, I've been telling my mom to put her house in a trust. You just really want to set yourself up. And I'll give you you got a little bit of a background. Like last year, we spent majority of the year setting up things so that if something were to happen for my dad, we were ready. But a lot of it was also because we were trying to get him approved for Medicaid, but we had power of attorney in place. Accounts were not in his name. He did not have any debt. So when he passed, he literally just passed with an empty backpack. Now, I can't say that for my mom, but I will tell you that this is the goal for this year, making sure that everything is in a line. So if something happens, I'm ready. So for those who are like thinking about reaching out to you, first, do you work with anybody outside of Maryland?
I do. So I do business planning outside of Maryland. Business consultants can do trusts and LLCs, so I can set one up in pretty much any state. Obviously, I'm local to Maryland, so we'll do a lot of Zoom calls, but I will help you figure that out. And then I also do LLC structures. My specialty is actually helping well, I call them entrepreneurs with multiple businesses and kind of the wealth protection piece in there as well. And I can help anywhere, and I'm crazy and give my cell phone number out in these phone calls. So, guys, get your papers out. You're about to get my cell phone number. And yes, it actually is my number. If you text me, I will get it.
She does answer. I promise you, she does answer. I don't text her a lot, but she does answer.
I do answer. Yes, I do. I mean, you put this on the calendar like 6 months ago, and I confirmed every time you asked. Um, but I do want to say something else about these statistics of estate planning. I don't know about most of our listeners, but I am a first generation person in America. My kids, they were born in America. I was not. I grew up in another country, and my parents worked hard to get me where I am. I mean, hard. My dad was a pizza driver. My mom, like, she didn't have a job here, but they were both doctors back home, and it's like they gave up everything to be here. And statistics say that if a family member or if you die without an estate plan or without a trust, the money you leave behind typically is gone. Like 83% of people, the money is gone in a year and a half. Year and a half. A person of color, that number goes up to 92%. With a trust, the third generation after the person who passed, 73% are still retaining wealth. Those numbers are mind-boggling to me, and when I think about that, I'm like, "Well, of course," because if I put limitations on what my children can do, I'm forcing them to be smart with money. I'm forcing them to do it, and you don't think about it that way, but there's a reason why that second statistic, if you die with a trust, the person of color statistic also jumps up. It jumps up tremendously, and the reason it does, I think it's because education, it's about protecting that wealth, and if you don't have a plan in order, my parents worked their butts off to help me, and if they had passed when I was younger, I probably would have lived the same life they did as far as my socioeconomic level because I didn't know anything about money. I was young. I mean, my parents did the best they could, but now I'm a little bit older. I am still here. My parents are still here, and I'm teaching my kids better money and better wealth management by, knowing about trusts, LLCs, estate planning.
And these are things we don't talk about. I want to say that William was saying, I came in late, but Diane is awesome. She's helping my family with the probate process. That's awesome.
Thanks, Elaine.
So I want to ask you, you talked about that you help businesses with their LLC business planning. If I was to call and I was like, I want to start a business, what's the first thing I need to keep in mind?
When you're starting a business, your questions really should be, how am I going to do it different? And then how do I set it up? So I think most of my friends who are successful business owners, and I've got quite a lot of them, the story is the same, and you're surely me, same mistake I made is I'm gonna start a business, I'm gonna start a social media, and I'm gonna do it right, and I'm just gonna advertise. But here's the thing, I didn't plan my LLC structure, I didn't plan my taxes, I wasn't making a profit. Why would I be thinking about how am I gonna limit my liability when I've got no liability, I've got no money? And I think most of the business owners that I know, if they become successful, there's a story that I hear on repeat, which is I got so big or I couldn't do my books. And now I have to spend so much time hiring a bookkeeper, an accountant, a lawyer because I didn't do it right when I started. If you are starting into a business, you are investing in yourself, and that investment should start with having the proper business entity structure, having the proper operating agreements, figuring out the state that you're in. What do I need to do to be compliant? Because if you ever get sued, maybe not now when you're worth, $10, but if you're worth 1 million and now you're getting sued, they're not looking at what you did yesterday. They're looking from the start of your business. Set yourself up right and invest in yourself. And I think a lot of the time business owners are like, I don't have money. I really need to focus on social media. And I'm like, you're not doing it right. Invest in yourself, your marketing, your legal structure, all of it. Just set it up right. Um, I have I have one client who unfortunately her husband passed.
Mm.
He was I don't know the exact age, but early 50s, like 51, 49. I think she's right under 50. They have a 7-year-old. He passed away unexpectedly. They had over 50 rental properties, and he didn't have a will. So when he passed unexpectedly, She was left with she called, she's like, I don't know where the bank accounts are, I don't know what houses we own, there's everything is everywhere." She was in my office prior to his burial because if you not set up right, now all of a sudden you have this whole other structure that's not done accurately. Don't expect that you're gonna, be successful and then you should go backtrack. Do it right in the beginning, do it easy. It's gonna be more affordable, and then you'll feel confident with yourself.
I love that you said that. Like a lot of times we're just like, oh, we're just going to start. Am I going to be a DBA? Am I going to do an LLC? And then we just go. But it really is setting up those foundations, setting up those, at least a little bit of a process. Social media is going to be there, I promise you. But I
Yeah.
personally, like, I won't even work with certain clinics if they have not even, I need to know that they've been around for a while because we want, first is your business can fold. I've seen entrepreneurs leave. I've seen in the 5 years I've been doing this, I'm been podcasting now 5 years and I've been in business for six, but I have seen people come and go. And you'll be surprised, like the things that they say, I was, the reason why I left was because I had a client who was going to sue me.
Mhm.
The reason why I left is because, things weren't going the books. They weren't really checking the books. I do it monthly, maybe by, every 2 months, but I still look at my books. I know what's going in, what's going out. Some people don't even do that. They just kind of are
Yeah.
like, yep, I know I'm going to be at a loss. And
Mhm.
we also have Fonte saying Diana did my LLC. She's super responsive and efficient. So I do want to ask that, like, when it comes to the LLC, is there a particular state that's better than the other, or should, if I live in Texas, I'm going to talk about me. I live in Texas. Should I create my LLC here in Texas, or should I do the one that's like in a whole nother city, state?
So yes, there are some beliefs that Wyoming, Nevada, Delaware all have sort of like these benefits on where your LLC should be and anonymity. And there's definitely benefits to opening it in other states. I think some attorneys will be like, oh, well, if you open it in Wyoming, there's state anonymity, whatever they say. And those are all true. In my personal experience as a lawyer, I do law in Maryland. I help people buy houses in Maryland. My investors buy houses in Maryland. The law's here. You're going to be taxed as a business in the state that you're in. Your lawsuit's going to be here. you know, I personally think it depends on what your goals are. But if you are in Texas and you're starting a small organization, I would start with just doing something local in your state. It's easier to become available. Also, there's a lot of grants for women, for veterans, for all sorts of individuals who, if they're a resident of that state and they want to start a business, there's so many resources for you. And I think as a first time business owner, you may want to consider that more over the benefits of anything else. As you expand, especially for those of you who might be real estate investors, I talk to a lot of them. I myself have 10 LLCs. Most of them are in Maryland because that's where my businesses are. But I also have one that's in Wyoming. And it's because the benefit of the Wyoming LLC for that entity made sense. But it's not just, at least in my finding, I think people just say, "You should do one in Nevada because it's got all this anonymity and they hear about it and, like, this is what should definitely happen." But the most effective business plan that you could make is one you're actually gonna utilize. And I find that if you do it in another state, most people don't they're like, "I don't know what I'm doing." And if you don't know what you're doing, you're not utilizing the benefits that you could for your own state.
And so, what I'm going to lead with is we're going to continue this conversation on Instagram. So, I'm inviting you to come and join us. I want to say thank you, Nada, for rooting me on because this is an important conversation. We should be having it more. But first, I want to make sure, where can we connect with you and how can we work with you?
Okay, so my cell number, you guys, I told you to get a pen. You guys ready? I want you to get your phone out. I want you to shoot me a text and be like, I'm listening to you right now. I need to fix my trust. My cell number is 443-739-6724. That is my actual cell phone number. If you text me right now, you're not going to get some automated message because it's literally sitting right here. Oh, and one of you already texted me, which is awesome. Um,
443.
739-6724. And I believe one of my staff members is actually listening to this, and she said she's going to put it down there as well. So you can take a look at it. And then my website is right on the screen, dklawmd.com. And you could text me, email me, whatever works for you. Honestly, I've got a social media handle. I'm sure, you're going to, last time you tagged me in every single media handle I probably had that I didn't even know I had. So reach out to me, whatever way, send a carrier pigeon. I'm happy to have a conversation.
Yes, send a carrier pigeon. Please let me know how that works because I love Harry Potter. But like I said, this episode is going to be uploaded and it will go out tomorrow. So if you are like, hey, I want to share this with a friend, it is also on YouTube where I would love for you to subscribe to me. And then also this episode you can listen to while you are running because guess what? There was so many gems that were dropped. Diana's amazing. She really does answer her phone. And I just want to thank everybody who joined in today, who's listening to the replay. And I want to thank you, Diana, for coming back, sharing all these gems, answering my millions of questions. And
Happy to help.
until my next live, which is next week, which I'm doing an Ask Me Anything, you'll look out for that. Have a wonderful evening or morning wherever you are. Bye, everybody.
Bye, guys.